The Secretary-General of the Arab League has called on the international community to accelerate the delivery of humanitarian aid to Lebanon following the disaster in Beirut. Talks between Bolivia's Supreme Electoral Tribunal and workers and social organisations to end protests over the postponement of the general elections have failed to reach an agreement. The President of Mauritania has appointed a new Prime Minister just hours after the previous government resigned. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. The Secretary-General of the Arab League has called on the international community to accelerate the delivery of humanitarian aid to Lebanon following the disaster in Beirut. Secretary-General Ahmed Aboud Ghet also urged Arab relief organisations to support the recovery efforts while noting the need for an urgent international movement to help Lebanon overcome the catastrophe. And Lebanese authorities have given investigators 4 days to identify those responsible for the blasts on Tuesday. Rescue operations continue as members of the Lebanese Red Cross, troops and volunteers search for anyone listed as missing under the rubble in areas near the port. Officials reported that the death toll so far stands at over 150, while over 5,000 people were injured, with both figures expected to rise. Investigators probing the deadly blast that ripped through the city are focusing on possible negligence in the storage of tons of explosives. The government has ordered the house arrest of several port officials on Wednesday, pending the findings of the investigation. A 2-week state of emergency has been declared while the security of Beirut is currently in the hands of the military. And a devastating explosions in the Lebanese capital destroyed several hospitals, resulting in shortages of medicine and medical equipment, as the country is also battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Analyst Randa Yassir of the International Civil Society Action Network discussed some of the challenges facing the Lebanese health system.
Lebanon is facing major challenges, especially on the level of the health system. We have been suffering during the past weeks because of the increase in the number of people affected by the COVID-19. We are now suffering after the big explosion that took place yesterday evening. We have a big problem because we have only 12 hospitals and some of them were affected by the explosion. We have medical teams that have died because of this explosion. We have big catastrophic ruins that took place in these hospitals that were destroyed by the explosion. There's shortage in the number of beds. There's shortage in the medical equipments that are needed. We are in a high need of having field hospitals and medical equipments and medicines to be provided. This explosion also affected the electricity and affected other facilities that will make it even harder for these hospitals to operate. We have seen a lot of initiatives that are trying to cover the gap, but also the people are trying to support by providing shelter. People are trying to support by different services to be provided to those injured and wounded or their houses were destroyed.
French President Emmanuel Macron visited Lebanon this Thursday, where he toured areas around the port of Beirut. President Macron said France would organise an international fundraising conference with European, American, Middle Eastern and other donors in order to raise money for food, medicine, housing and other urgent aid for Lebanon. However, the leader of the former colonial power piled on further pressure for reforms in the country, which is experiencing an economic and political crisis, stressing that aid would not fall into what he described as corrupt hands.
La priorité, c'est l'aide de soutien à la population.
The priority is aid, unconditional support for the population, for months and years now. However, France has been demanding indispensable reforms in certain sectors: energy, government, procurement, and the fight against corruption. If these reforms are not carried out, Lebanon will continue to sink. We know that the crisis here is serious. It implies a historical responsibility on the part of the leaders in place. It is a political, moral, economic and financial crisis of which the Lebanese people are the first victims.
And earlier this Thursday, our correspondent in Lebanon, Wafi Ibrahim, spoke to people on the ground assisting the recovery efforts in Beirut.
Hello, what's your name?
My name is Chloe.
Are you from Lebanon?
Yes, I am Lebanese and I study in Madrid.
What are you doing here?
I'm helping the people of Beirut whose homes are damaged.
What are you going to do here? What kind of aid?
We go to people's homes and help them. If they need food or something else, we provide it for them.
How do you feel? Do you feel hopeful that Lebanon will overcome the situation?
I am very grateful for the help of foreign people and the presence of President Macron here. It is very good. Also grateful for the help of all the countries that have sent humanitarian aid to Lebanon. People and health supplies. It is very good. I am very grateful for all the people here that are helping people that have lost their homes and all they had.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
No, thank you.
Hundreds of Palestinians held a candle-lit vigil on Wednesday to express their condolences and support for the Lebanese people. Residents in the city of Rafah in the south of the Gaza Strip paid tribute to the victims of the explosions in Beirut on Tuesday. Meanwhile, in the city of Khan Yunis, dozens participated in a blood donation campaign to help Lebanese health authorities in the recovery of the thousands injured.
We are here in solidarity with our dear Lebanese people and we wish them peace. We send all our prayers to the Lebanese people from the besieged people of Gaza.
We are here in solidarity with our dear Lebanese people and we wish them peace. We send all our prayers to the Lebanese from the besieged people of Gaza.
Iraqi officials reported a massive fire in more than 20 warehouses of wholesale markets in the central city of Najaf this Wednesday. Fire brigades from other provinces of the country were sent to the scene to control the flames. Local sources believe the fire was caused by an electrical malfunction. Despite the serious material and economic damages, no deaths have been reported. The warehouses are one of the main points of sale in the city. And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Talks between Bolivia's Supreme Electoral Tribunal and the Bolivian Workers' Center, the country's chief trade union federation, as well as other social organizations, failed to reach an agreement over the electoral date, which was postponed to October 18th. President of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, Salvador Romero, announced the failure of the negotiations while highlighting that no change had been made and the elections would still take place on October 18th. Meanwhile, representatives of workers and social organisations have stressed that the move by the electoral body is an example of bowing to pressure from the de facto government. The Trade Union Federation called an indefinite general strike at the beginning of the week to demand that the vote be held on the previously agreed date of September 6. Widespread protests have blocked the main roads and highways in 6 of 9 Bolivian provinces for the past 4 days. And this Thursday, Bolivia is celebrating its Independence Day in the midst of the ongoing social unrest and political persecution by the de facto regime since the coup against President Evo Morales last year.
This August 6th, Bolivia commemorates its 195th anniversary of independence from Spain. On July 1825, the Chuquisaca Deliberative Assembly proclaimed the entire independence of the provinces of the Upper Peru and drafted Bolivia's first republican constitution, which was later signed on 6th August 1825. This date also marks a tribute to Bolivia's independence patriots, among them the liberator Simón Bolívar, marcher Antonio José de Sucre, the indigenous Aymara leader Tupac Katari, the indigenous heroine Bartolina Sisa, and guerrilla military leader Juana Arzurdui.
On Wednesday, the Argentinian Congress approved 2 bills that strengthen Argentina's claims of sovereignty over the Malvinas Islands. After an over 15-hour session, and by a large majority, the Argentinian Chamber of Deputies approved the 2 bills related to the Malvinas Islands, a territory disputed with the United Kingdom, which seized it in 1833. The legislation seeks to establish a new demarcation of the external limit of the Argentinian continental shelf and reinforce sovereignty over subsoil and seabed resources. Meanwhile, an advisory council headed by the president was created to address sovereignty rights over the Malvinas, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands and adjoining maritime and insular spaces. In Chile, Mapuche political prisoners have refused to take part in the government's so-called intercultural talks. The 8 Mapuche political prisoners on hunger strike at the Angol prison decided on Wednesday that they would no longer drink water due to the lack of progress in the talks with government of President Sebastián Piñera. Leader of the prisoners, Rodrigo Curipan, stated that they would not take part in the intercultural talks organised by the Ministry of Justice on Friday, which will bring together Mapuche leaders, academics and other professionals. Rodrigo added that for them, these meetings do not respond to the critical situation of the 27 Mapuche prisoners held in different prisons in the Araucania and Biobío regions and have little to do with a critical view and openness on the implementation of the International Labour Organization's Convention No. 169 on indigenous and tribal peoples. And protesters once again took to the streets in Chile demanding the release of Mapuche political prisoners and an end to racism and discrimination. Likewise, they've called on the entire Chilean population to join the mobilizations.
We demand freedom for our brothers who are carrying out a hunger strike, because our brother in Angol prison also stopped drinking liquids, together with the other brothers in Temuco prison, to demand their freedom and Convention 169. And also to say that we do not want any more raids of Mapuche communities. Today we want to make a call for action, to go out to the streets with your Mapuche flag, because there were lots of people that went out with their Mapuche flag during the social unrest. That is why we have made this call, so that we protest, so that this does not go unpunished. No more discrimination against the Mapuche people. We demand freedom for all Mapuche political prisoners.
This Thursday, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, informed of the most recent measures the country will adopt in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. In a press briefing, Prime Minister Mottley stressed that eliminating all the risks associated with the spread of the virus is not entirely possible. Regarding the possibility of mandatory negative COVID-19 tests for arriving passengers, Mottley explained that at this point, authorities are only strongly advising that people obtain the tests, taking into account that in some countries, access to test results within the required 72-hour period is not always possible. As such, she said the government is prepared to test people when they arrive and remains confident that the PCR test being used in the country is still the gold standard.
For those persons who would have been closed, let me say first that we did not do it.
Cuban health authorities offered an update on COVID-19 cases this Thursday.
As a result of the analysis of these samples, where 49 people were tested positive yesterday, very high COVID-19 figures in our country. In this way, we have a cumulative sample size of 285,471 and 2,775 people, which represents 0.97% of the total number of the testing for COVID-19.
And the Cuban Director of Epidemiology also reported new COVID-19 recoveries.
Yesterday, there were 13 discharges in our country, a number consistent with the cases diagnosed a few days ago. Nevertheless, the number is at a disadvantage compared with the number of cases confirmed yesterday. This way, 87.8% of the positive cases so far diagnosed have recovered. We are talking about 2,409 people.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Mauritanian President Mohammad Gassowini has appointed a new Prime Minister just hours after the previous government resigned. Prime Minister Ismail Sheikh Sidiya announced his resignation and that of the entire government this Thursday amid an investigation into alleged high-level corruption. President Gassowini appointed veteran public administrator Mohammad Bilal as Prime Minister. The political system in Mauritania has been rocked this year by a parliamentary investigation into alleged corruption in the government of former President Mohammad Abdel Aziz, who stepped down last year after a decade in power.
I tendered the government's resignation to the president. It was an opportunity to thank him for the trust he had placed in me during that period. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the government team for the efforts made throughout this period in the service of Mauritania and its people.
Schools have reopened in Nigeria under strict COVID-19 preventative measures.
Teachers not to ensure that they keep their social distance from students. It's usually hard for teachers because there's a certain level of physical interaction that you want, but in this case this is an emergency, and so we've done a lot of training for the teachers to help them, to guide them through this rather difficult stage.
I just lost hope that, okay, we're not going to resume this year, there's no need for me to be reading. Well, now that we have resumed school, I feel very happy and fulfilled. Even though the fear of contracting the virus is still there, I was still putting my best efforts to put in the safety measures to protect myself from contracting the virus.
We've been taught to wash our hands regularly, to observe social distance with our peers whenever we're talking, and we should use our face masks always. And I'm sure with all this put in place, I will go home safe the way I came to school.
Congolese authorities announced the withdrawal of Zambian troops from disputed border territories this Thursday.
The report of the SADC mission carried out from the 22nd to the 29th of July 2020 led to Zambia's recognition that the border territories of Kalumbamba and Kibanga that it had occupied belonged to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As of August 4, 2020, our competent services and all Congolese and foreign officials have noted the effective withdrawal of Zambian troops. The Joint Committee also ordered the installation of the provisional border pillars, pending the construction of the final border pillars and the use of durable materials. This, of course, has not put an end to all aspects of this dispute, which will continue to be the subject of negotiations between the two parties.
A campaign has been launched in Spain to demand that the government remove the royal title of King Emeritus from former Spanish King Juan Carlos following recent corruption scandals. The honorary and lifetime title was awarded to Juan Carlos after his abdication in 2014 by the government of Mariano Rajoy. Spanish newspaper Público, responsible for launching the campaign, argued that the honour can be withdrawn immediately by the current government. Over 35,000 people have already signed the proposal, which also seeks to rename avenues, parks and public institutions which were named after the king, including the King Juan Carlos University in Madrid. Meanwhile, public discontent surrounding the Spanish crown has grown in recent days following corruption revelations and the fleeing of Juan Carlos to the Dominican Republic. Spain's health ministry has denied that the country is facing a second wave of COVID-19 infections, despite a spike in cases in recent days. According to the Spanish government's own figures, over the past 7 days, more than 19,000 new COVID-19 cases have been confirmed, representing an average of nearly 2,800 per day. A week earlier, the rate was an average 1,900 cases per day, and the week before that, the daily figure was 1,400. The European nation is one of the most badly hit by the novel coronavirus, registering more than 350,000 cases, while the death toll stands at 28,500.
It is true that calling this a second wave has a technical component. I would not call it a second wave until we have uncontrolled community transmission that really represents an increase in transmission, and not just that. We detect a lot more of it. But it is true that there is also a part of the concept that is very semantic. It's a great concept that's quite fuzzy. The same situation in some cases could be called a second wave. In others, it's not. We have more detection, and that means in the data we detect more cases. This does not mean, please do not misunderstand, that we do not continue to have transmission. We continue to have, and therefore this data is real, but it is difficult to compare it with previous months.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesoenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.